Hey all, welcome to the Ask the Experts Azure Networking session, and welcome to day 2 of Build. Today we have a number of Azure Networking PMs here to answer questions about any questions you have about Azure Networking. So in terms of how this will work is you can type your question into the live Q&A panel. We'll be monitoring those questions, and I'll be asking the top most voted questions so that everyone can hear the answer. And if we get too many questions to answer, then we'll also try to answer them on text in the Q&A panel. So yeah, we have a wide variety of people here all over Azure Networking, so feel free to ask any questions that you have. We'll start with a couple questions in the queue. All right. So, all right, so first question. Is there a reference architecture or diagram showing recommended network configuration for multiple VNets using VPN gateway to on-premise databases and AKS in Azure running web apps? Does anyone have an answer to that? Okay, we can come back to that question.
Yeah, I think that I think that it's fairly comprehensive in the AKS documents today. Narayan may have some additional thought process here, but we can definitely publish one. Within the AKS documentation, there is on-premises access using VPN or
You went on mute about halfway through your answer, Jared.
Not sure why. Sorry, I meant to say I did publish a link to the AKS documentation, and so take a look there. But Narayan mentioned that we will get one published. Yeah, one good question. Someone asked if we could introduce everyone. So why don't we just do a quick round and we can switch videos as we go. I'm Jared Ross. I am the product manager on ExpressRoute and Azure Bastion. And so if you have any questions related to that, I'm happy to take those. Kat, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Kat. I'm a PM on the Application Gateway team.
John? John, you're muted.
I'm hoping people can read my lips. Hi, I'm John Ormond on the Azure Networking team. I focus a lot on ExpressRoute, but also work with external customers a fair bit. Thanks.
Christian, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Christian Kutz. I'm part of the Azure Networking team. We're specifically the SDN team, and we take care of services that are related to the virtual network, everything from load balancer, virtual network, public IPs, virtual net, NAT Gateway Resources, private link, service endpoints, all that sort of good stuff.
It looks like you got a friend in your back. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, I brought backup, so hopefully Molly and I can answer all the questions here.
And Narayan, were you able to find your mute button? Okay, well, Narayan's the PM lead on SDN as well, and so any of the things Christian mentioned, he can also talk through, and we should be able to answer a good amount of them as well. So keep them coming.
Yep. All right, so let's go for another question. Will service endpoint policies be expanded beyond storage, like key vaults? Does anyone know this?
What was the?
It sounds like the ask is, will we get Key Vault as a service endpoint?
I'll let Narayan speak, but I believe we do have Key Vault for that already. If he's able to answer it on the chat, that would be great. Yep, Narayan's saying it's already there.
Great.
How about additional services?
We have I'll let Narayan speak again. Unfortunately, he can't get the mute. We have tons of services on Service Endpoint, and we also released Private Link a number of months ago that has tons of services as well. Let me drop the link in to the Q&A so that we can respond to it.
Cool. Thanks, Jared. Question for you, Jared. What is Azure Bastion?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you think about the Azure, if you think about the normal jump box scenario within your on-premises network, what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a service that allowed us to be able to manage that on behalf of you, but be able to access VMs within your virtual network securely without exposing a public IP address for those virtual machines. And we support both Windows and Linux. It's basically a managed jump box, and we're adding functionality constantly to it to be able to support new scenarios as they come up. But we've seen incredible adoption there, and we definitely recommend checking it out within your virtual network today.
So follow-up
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Hey.
Narayan.
Finally. All right, I had to rejoin.
Do you want to, Narayan, do we want to touch back on the Service Endpoint and Private Link conversation? I think that that's a really important one.
Yeah, maybe I missed. You can ask me specifically if I missed something, but with respect to Service Endpoint and Private Link, we did announce a bunch of services to support service endpoints, which is a secure way to connect from your VNet to the services. And on the service side, you can restrict your access to specific VNets where you have configured service endpoints. But the traffic was still going on the public IP address. Then the next incarnation of that is Private Link, where you can take a resource, a PaaS resource, and then map it into your VNet straight away. And of course, lock the resource down only to that VNet that you have mapped it to. So when you talk to the resource from your VNet, you're talking on a private IP address, just like you talk to another VM in your VNet. So that's Private Link. So almost think of it as a V2 of service endpoints. So every service that supported service endpoints now support Private Link. And there are a lot more services supporting Private Link directly. So in the future, you'll see that all PaaS services will support Private Link directly.
Great, thanks for the answer, Narayan. Jared, there are a couple other Bastion questions. So 2 questions. Will there be, or what's the timeline for peered VNet support, and remote desktop client access or failing static publishable HTML5 links to the canvas? I don't know what that second one is supposed to be, but
I'll answer the first one. Peered VNet support is actively being built right now, and we're having some good validation right now. Regarding timeline, we'll share more as we get closer, but we're super excited about this functionality. Regarding RD client access, I'm assuming that the question is regarding native client support. We're looking into this, but we don't have a solid timeline right now to support that. I see another question as well. I'll take this one. Any plans to speed up deployment time of a VPN gateway? It's something that we're looking into as well. We see VPN gateway as a one-time deployment, but we hear the feedback loud and clear that it definitely could be improved.
I read Kat, are we going through the questions one by one?
yeah, so we're publishing questions, and then I'm reading out the questions from our published list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Feel free to publish questions that you want to address.
The next one was, can we achieve one-touch provisioning like SDN on Azure? I think maybe it's a loaded question, but if they ask us more about, can we simplify the experience? There are a lot of controls, and we want more simplified, lesser knobs. We certainly are working on that. I'm not sure that we can just have one magic button for all our networking. I wish it be that simple, but it won't be. But definitely a lot of the SDN controls like NSGs and UDRs and VNet peerings, we're definitely working on trying to give a simplified experience to manage those. So you will see more simplified stuff coming out of Azure Networking.
Cool. Let me answer the question real quick about Wildcard listeners on NAT Gateway. It should be going into public preview very shortly, and it will be going GA in the next few months. So definitely look out for that.
Hey, John, there's a good one that looks to have come in that I just published. If you want to take that one, it may be a really cool architectural one. If you want to take a second, we can come back to that one.
Is that the MPLS one?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me digest.
Sounds good.
I'll answer another question about App Gateway in terms of BlueGreen deployments. You can definitely set up two different. You can set up your, one deployment for blue and one deployment for green, and you can switch by adjusting the rules, and that'll help you switch from the old to the new on App Gateway.
Hey, Narayan, good one for you as well about NSGs and firewall, the differences between those and maybe when to use both of them.
Yeah, certainly. So NSGs and firewalls are quite different and unique in that NSG is a layer 4 network firewall. As you know, it supports 5-tuple IP inbound and outbound controls, and firewall can do more layer 7 stuff like FQDN based filtering. And when to use what? Typically, if you're within a VNet, if you're talking between subnets, and I think NSGs would get you most of it. If you have a very simple website, if you just want to control RDP to your VMs, NSG would be good enough. But in cases where you're talking between VNets, and there are some threat vectors that you want to analyze, you want to log every packet going between the VNets. That's when firewall will be a good thing to use. And you can both can work in conjunction. I mean, microsegmentation using NSG within a VNet, and you can put a firewall in a shared VNet and then route through the firewall when you go outside your VNet, either to the internet or to other VNets. That's a good use case.
Awesome.
So the question on NSG service type for Windows updates. I know this has been a popular ask recently. All I can say is we're working on it. And then you will see an update from us soon. But it's not a definitive timeline I can share.
All right. Regarding the MPLS question that was in the Q&A, it was really a disaster recovery type question about having an MPLS network that connects your corporation and then having two ExpressRoute circuits. ExpressRoute it feels like an endpoint at the end of the MPLS, so it doesn't really matter that it's MPLS versus your corporate network via, I don't know, Ethernet circuits or something like that. The question is just how do you set up your VNets? And so I've actually pasted into a response to that question that has a link to Azure documentation about disaster recovery that talks specifically about how would you set that up. And basically you would send your VNet in each region, you would connect them to both ExpressRoute circuits and give them weighting. So that way if one falls out, they can switch to the other side. Because they're both connected to MPLS, on the MPLS side, they'll always be able to get everywhere just based on the properties of MPLS. So I would recommend just checking out that document and looking at the design there that has, like I said, two ExpressRoute circuits, which I think gets to the root of your question. Hope that helps.
Another one for you, Narayan. Are there any plans for FQDN support for NSGs?
Not in the near-term plan. That's one of the things where you can get through firewall today.
Yep.
So,
yeah, good comparison on the two of those. Another one for you, Narayan. Is there a timeline for supporting NSGs and UDRs for private endpoint traffic?
Yes. That's something that we're working on. That's in the near-term roadmap. The next 6 months or so, we will have NSGs and UDR supports for private endpoint.
Yeah, another one that just came in as well that I'll take is related to DDoS protection on websites. By default, every endpoint in Microsoft is protected by the DDoS protection basic service, and that does basic level protection for volumetric attacks, etc. And it uses basic machine learning, etc. If you want to be able to have something that learns your traffic patterns over time, DDoS protection standard is really going to be the way you want to go. And we can post a link here. What that does is that utilizes the advanced machine learning algorithms that we have and learns over time what your traffic patterns are going to be. You're going to get much more granular monitoring capabilities. advanced response for a DDoS attack occurring on your network, etc. So there's a lot of great capabilities, and we definitely recommend you taking a look at DDoS Protection Standard. John just posted that, so thanks very much.
I'll pick the next one, or the one right above that. Will peering support transitive routing without requiring an NVA? It totally does. I think it's a little bit confusing today because when you set the UDR routes, I think the next top type says network virtual appliance. But really, it's just a way to specify the IP address of the destination. So if you do have a server, let's say in a hub VNet or a shared VNet, and from the spoke you want to use and transit through that device, you can totally do it. I mean, there is nothing like it has to be declared as an NVA. So we already support that.
Hey, John, I'm going to punt the next one to you. This is right up your alley. What is the future of the VDC reference architecture? Is it being developed further to include new networking innovations? Where does it make sense and not make sense to apply?
Yeah, so the virtual data center VDC document, that's actually my fault. So lack of updates, you can blame me for that. Thanks, Jared. Yeah. So that is something that I do rev, not as often as I need to, but it does get revved as new features come out. I've got Bastion right now on the backlog to be added to that doc. So yeah, that is a living document. Now, how to make sense of it and how to apply it, it's really not a feature itself, it's more of a concept. So it's just, how do you think about Azure holistically so that you're not just deploying an app, then deploying another app and deploying another app, and each app maybe has a firewall and has an express route and has a lot of the same components that you could bring together, and again, holistically about Azure as a virtual data center, as opposed to just isolated workload islands. So that's really what that paper is about. So it's not specific about this exact type of implementation. It's about how do you bring all the features together to make it more like a virtual data center instead of those workload islands. So yes, it is still an active and live document, and it is under development. I won't say continually, but periodically throughout the year, especially at events like Build and Ignite. Those big events where we tend to do announcements, it's usually post that I'll take all of the announcements and wrap them into that document.
Kat, I got a good one for you. We'd like to have a blue and green deployment and swap our servers behind an app gateway. Is this a recommended setup? I think that this is probably related to A/B testing. Kat, you're on mute.
Hello. Okay. I thought I addressed that earlier. You can have both deployments in the backend and change out the rule to point to a different backend. There was another question about the app gateway private IP only mode. We're currently working on that. Timeline would be next few months as well. It's definitely something that's a priority for us because we want to get to parity with V1 on V2.
Narayan, one for you, the AZ SQL MI.
Yeah, I was just reading that. Thanks. I took like 1 minute to read that fully, but yeah. So,
Christian, do you want to take the L2 network one, perhaps?
He was replying.
Yes, I'm still typing an answer.
Okay. Do you want to talk about it, or do you want to type? It's up to you.
I think he's going for typing.
Let me just talk about it. You might hear some background noise, but so Azure fundamentally is a layer 3 virtualization. So we do not have a layer 2 virtualization that is the underpinning. It's all virtualized to layer 3. So it's all IP protocol based. And in fact, when you look at your virtual machine, you'll see that the ARP information looks a little strange because it's all the same for every single machine. And that is because Azure just emulates just enough to keep the operating system happy that is expecting a layer 2 stack to exist there. But it doesn't have really any function beyond that. So layer 2 technologies like gratuitous ARP or anything along those lines, HSRP, for example, for failover, those types of things you cannot do in Azure in that form. There are other ways to achieve the same outcome in a lot of these cases. And I suppose if you hack together your own stack, you could probably bridge layer 2 between VMs over TCP or UDP. But I don't think that is something that is officially supported in any shape or form, or I'd recommend for production. But maybe for a mock-up, that's sufficient. I'm not sure what LLDB refers to. If that is really the debugger. If it is, then I don't understand the connection to layer 2 network. So maybe clarify a little bit. I hope that helps. Please ask why.
Thanks, Christian.
Yeah, great, thanks. So on SQLMI question, so we have we've done some modifications to make it a little bit easier to deploy SQLMI and manage it. It's called SQLMI automatically can manage the NSGs and UDRs on that particular subnet. But for that, though, you have to delegate a subnet to SQLMI and kind of have SQLMI habit it. So it'll modify the right NSGs and UDRs through a policy mechanism. So it'll just function. But in the cases where you want to share the subnet and you want to make changes to the subnet as well, I do understand that it could become a little bit challenging to keep SQLMI happy as well as put in your policies. As a long-term roadmap, we're looking at the injected services to have a more cleaner way to express their policies and not interfere with customer expressed policies. But that's a little way out. But I think but we definitely we hear that and then we are working on it and we'll address that holistically at some point in the future.
Another good one that just came in is related to accelerated networking, when not to use it. We see in most cases accelerated networking is going to provide a lot of really great benefits for you. I'll drop the link into the chat in a bit. But what accelerated networking is doing under the covers is it's exposing our hardware NIC to the VM directly, and we're doing a lot of the software-defined networking intelligence directly on the hardware NIC, and so we're removing potential software latency in favor of getting the best possible performance. Like I said, in most cases, we see that you should always choose it if your VM SKU supports it. If you have any scenarios, please feel free to follow up. It would be great to understand if there's scenarios where you feel it may not be applicable, but overwhelmingly, we highly recommend it.
I just took another one. There's a question about simple architecture of a web service with SQL Server, when to use virtual network and private IP versus when to use public IP. I think I like to say that when you're talking between two services in Azure, the traffic always stays within our backbone network, right? So even when you're using public IP for that matter, when it goes from service 1 to service 2, it's still within the Azure backbone network. The difference, though, is that if you leave the SQL as a public IP, then someone else from outside could also get in. And by putting it behind a private link, if you're using SQL DB or if you're using SQLMI, putting it inside the VNet gives an extra layer of protection where it cuts off the network access from outside and keeps it completely private to your VNet. So it's more of a security enhancement, but from a routing optimization standpoint, between Azure services, you're always on the backbone network. So maybe that gives you some ideas to decide when to use VNet and when not.
Another one for you, Christian, maybe you have some background in the past. Will there be an option to turn off forced IP tunneling outbound traffic on standard load balancer? I don't know if you have context there. You're muted. Okay. Yeah,
if Christian is muted, I can just take that. Actually,
I'm typing.
so no, you're typing.
Looks like he's typed. Here, we'll come back to that one. Is there a way of generating syslog of the network traffic of a VNet? We would need to dive into that one significantly more to understand where you would potentially want to, what data you're looking for that you would traditionally have in syslog. As Christian mentioned earlier regarding the L2 question, the VNet by itself is a layer 3 overlay. And so you don't see the physical network that Microsoft runs. Now, of course, there are some components like ExpressRoute that are using physical infrastructure, the Microsoft Enterprise Edge routers. And we're looking constantly at ways of exposing metrics and logging there to make you as productive as possible and to be able to do the same level of troubleshooting that you would do on premises while still being a multi-tenant environment where we do host the hardware for you. But it would be great to know more information regarding that and what information you would like to see specifically that would traditionally be in Syslog on-prem. Let's see. Sorry, we're just looking through lots and lots of questions coming in.
Yeah. So I picked up this question. It says it's published, but I can't find it there. Somebody's asking about service endpoint policies. Will that be expanded beyond storage to things like Key Vault? That was the question. The answer is no. We will not be expanding it because we are moving towards private link, which does that. What policies did. So all the new services will be on private link, but may not support service endpoint policies. The ones that already support service endpoint policies will continue to support that, but the new ones will move towards private link.
Narayan, there was another question on IoT. Do we have any private link or service endpoint support for any of the IoT scenarios today, or is there any roadmap?
Is that a question for me? Maybe I missed it last audio.
No, sorry, it was you. Just strictly, someone's asking if we've got sensor devices that are deployed with IoT, Azure IoT services, IoT Hub. Do we have any support for any of those with private link or service endpoints today? Yeah,
totally. It's coming. In fact, the announcement will come out soon. IoT Hub will support private link. So those can reach into IoT Hub privately.
Great. Thank you. We'd like this, I'll go back to the Syslog one because it looks like it's going to come up. We would like Syslog traffic, a VPN server to monitor the usage of the users and send this information to the Microsoft Cloud, Cloud App Security Server for app discovery. We would probably want to take a deeper dive into that one as well. Syslogs traditionally are more for debugging and diagnosability, not so much for carrying flow level information. But regarding flow level information, it's good feedback, and we'll look to see how we can incorporate that in the future.
And what exactly is needed here? In some cases, you could actually force the traffic to go when it goes back out to the internet, for example, through an appliance for inspection and analytics, and that might be able to solve some of this.
Yeah, good feedback.
I think it kind of depends on what the scenario is. So where does the destination of this traffic go? Jared's response is certainly correct.
L3 IDS, that's something that we'd want to understand more about what you're looking to accomplish with an L3 IDS solution. We definitely have thoughts and capabilities that we're looking at in the future to support IDS at probably higher layers of the stack, but it would be good to get some more feedback on that one. Same thing on Azure Firewall being cheaper. Definitely great feedback. We'd love to keep hearing that feedback.
Okay.
John, I got a good one for you. I'll read it out to you and I'll publish it in a second. At some point, could you guys put together some tutorials for developers so that they can understand the networking components and how they work together? Having come from development, all of the service endpoint stuff is very confusing. How to secure services makes things more difficult to architect stuff from a developer perspective when we don't always understand the networking pieces. And I think that, Narayan, you can probably tag on to some of what John's thought process is as well.
Yeah, we've actually got on our backlog a similar type of document, but it's for traditional on-prem networking people on how to translate that knowledge to the cloud. I don't actually have doing that for non-networking people on my list, but that's a kind of an obvious thing to put on the list. So yeah, so I will add that, and if someone else in the org is not working on it, we will get something out in the next probably 6 months or so to do something along those lines to give a primer for networking knowledge in Azure. It's a good idea. Thank you.
Anything to add there, Narayan? If not, I can. We got another one for you.
Let's go to another one. I think John answered it. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Take the next one.
I'm not sure if this is off topic. Can you please discuss private versus public storage? Would you make storage public and then control access via firewall, or make it private and use VPN to Azure to keep it secure, maybe using private link, for example?
So I think with respect to Azure storage, I think either way you do it, you end up with the same configuration, right? Meaning storage is shared service. So when you make it private, what you're doing is you're cutting off that internet access point. I mean, if you try to go into that storage by using a public IP address, you found out you still won't be allowed inside, right? It'll only look for a private network ID in your packet, won't let you in. So that's what private link gives you. So a public storage, and the other option to control storage is an IP-based ACL, where you still keep the internet route open, and then you allow specific public IPs to talk to it. So which I would recommend that, if you are trying to protect network protection for a storage, then use the private endpoint way, because it's more scalable, where you can use all of your on-prem network as well as your Azure network to control it, and then with the NSGs in the future, you can also control within your network who gets access to it. So that will be the preferred method.
Kat, you've been way too quiet, so we got one for you. Can we expect rewrite annotation support in NAT Gateway KDS ingress once wildcards are supported?
Yeah, so I was just about to address that one.
And
So actually the wildcards themselves are wildcard listeners themselves are supported on AGIC, App Gateway Ingress Controller already right now. We just did a new release today that you can try out on our GitHub for the latest wildcard preview. But in terms of the rewrite things, URL rewrite is set to go public preview and GA very soon, but header rewrite is already available on App Gateway, and that's something that is on top of our priority list to also support with AGIC as well.
cool. John, lots and lots and lots of feedback for your doc to translate the on-prem to non-networking people, on-prem and convert it to networking in Azure, and lots of people coming from the non-networking world. So for better or for worse, thank you.
All right, well, check back in next build to see if I've done it or not.
Narayan, go ahead.
So there's a question for you, Jared. Maybe you want to take that. I don't know if you want, but when you connect an enterprise WAN to multiple Azure regions with VPCs connected via Equinix to Azure, what are the best practices for this complex routing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have John on our team as well, and his team actually wrote a really good paper on high availability within Azure, and it's a blog post that we put out that then has a bunch of docs that you can talk about. The way in general that you want to think about connecting to multiple express route circuits in multiple locations to multiple regions is it's all about the high availability story. And so just like in general connectivity practices, you want to be as close to the user as possible. And so when you're thinking about your connectivity story, if you're in Washington, D.C., for example, your closest regions are going to be East US and East US 2. And so you want to make sure that that's your optimal connectivity. But you also may have additional offices or headquarters or data centers in Chicago, for example. And you can connect that circuit to the VNet in East US and East US 2 using the Microsoft backbone today. And you can do routing preferences and a whole bunch of BGP selection methods to be able to ensure that your main use case is going through Washington, D.C., and then you may have some additional use cases to go through Chicago. That being said, if you do see that Washington, D.C. is starting to get degraded, you also want to make sure that you have a good failover story as well. And so in the case that Washington, D.C. goes down, you want to be testing that failover specifically to Chicago in the case that you do see that failover. We do have a method within Azure today to do a reset of the peering or to bring down the peering from Azure. So you don't have to touch your routers directly, but be able to use ours to do that. The benefit of that is that that's the best way of testing to know when you hit a live site event that you are able to act on it quickly and have the native protocol take over. John, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that, but.
Yeah, when thinking about disaster recovery, it's important to realize that ExpressRoute isn't technically inside an Azure region. So when we say East US versus Washington, DC, the ExpressRoute physical routers and the place that you're connecting into Microsoft's network is outside of the East US data centers. It's actually in a co-location facility like a NextDC or Equinix or Digital Realty, et cetera. And so when you're thinking about failure modes, it's important to realize that Azure could fail, but your ExpressRoute is still up, and conversely, Equinix could fail, but Azure is still up. So how does your design, is your gateway connected to multiple ExpressRoute circuits to make sure that depending on which piece would fail, are you covered by your DR plans? So don't just think of Azure as just, East US. There's also that ExpressRoute point that is an interim step on your data path that you have to consider, well, what if that piece fell out as well? And so by doing that, you can design your corporate network for geo redundancy and then also your cloud layer for geo redundancy, so that no matter what potential failure point you have in the path, you're covered always. So just realize that ExpressRoute at our edge is not in the actual physical Azure region data center.
And maybe another one for you, Narayan, because I know that this is a few customers have asked about this on this thread already. Will Azure Monitor get an inbound service tag for monitor availability on internal ASCs?
Inbound tag for, sorry, what is the question? I want to read it again.
Yeah, it's related to app service environment and inbound service tags. I think it's probably related to management traffic, really. We can.
Sorry, can you come again?
Yeah,
I lost you for 10 seconds there.
No worries. It's related.
Oh, this one. Okay.
Yeah, ASC.
Got it.
Management
Azure
traffic.
Monitor get an inbound service tag for monitor. Oh, yeah. So Azure Monitor tag is being worked upon. I think it's currently probably like recommended to be used outbound only. I think probably that's the question to say when will it be used for, that could be used for inbound. I think for inbound, there's a lot of dynamic IP addresses that get assigned, and that's why it doesn't come under the tag. But something that we should actually look into. If it is important, we should find a way to get that. So yeah, that we look at it as a feedback that we take.
Yeah, and just to amplify what Christian's saying, is anyone here using Virtual Network NAT, NAT Gateway Resource? Any questions or feedback? This was a pretty massive feature that we took on, and so we'd love to hear your feedback, how you're using it, how you want to use it in the future. Are there any additional features or functionality that you would like that we don't have today? Any feedback would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good. I just published one more and just wanted to answer. It's very high level, but I thought maybe it's covering multiple things. So how does Azure prevent my Azure resources from malicious place attack via his or her own Azure resources? So I will take a crack at it, and John or Jared, anyone else you want to add, you can add later as well. So the premise is, like, the question is probably framed from inside Azure attacks. So one thing I like to say is each Azure user's resources are in their own subscription, and then when they deploy, they're into a specific virtual network. You have to have every resource, specifically VMs, on your or VMSS or Kubernetes, whatever it is, into your own virtual network. And in Azure, our virtualization stack makes sure that each of these compute resources gets a separate network interface card for itself, and then rules are programmed over there where others running in Azure can't reach these compute resources privately. Only the compute resources in the same private network, which is the same VNet, would be allowed default access to your Azure resource. Even that could be controlled by NSGs if you want only specific parts of a network to talk to you. But by default, though, X cannot talk to vice resource because they'll be in two different VNets and the networks are completely isolated. They're virtual networks, that is running off of the shared physical network. However, they are logical separated L3 networks, and they have separate network interface cards, and the interaction is not allowed across networks. So. If nobody else wants to add anything more, then we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, taking a look right now.
So there was an IoT question that came up multiple times. I'm not sure whether I published that already.
Yeah.
I think there was a question about about IoT. So I'm not sure about all the specifics here, but the way to make it work privately would be that for every customer service, a new IoT hub will be created in a multi-tenant environment, and that new IoT hub can then be projected, privately into that specific customer's network. So the customer can then get a private endpoint to that IoT hub, and only they can access that particular IoT hub. In situations where the IoT hub had to be shared, could be done where there is one common shared IoT hub that is hosted by the service provider, and each user could establish their own private endpoint to that particular shared IoT hub, and the service provider would have to allow those different private endpoints to access them. So there'll be a bit of a two-way configuration over here, but it is achievable. But in practice, what we see is most customers will have their own IoT hub resource that is mapped into their specific VNet that they will use for to come into Azure as a private network access point.
Cool. Hey, Christian, a few came in for Nat after you asked that. So if you don't mind, I'm going to send it over to you. But first one, is there any reason the data processing for NAT Gateway is so high when compared to a load balancer? Sorry, that's a tough one. You're on mute, Christian, if you're talking.
So for,
yeah,
sorry, for, hang on, I'm just looking at the questions here. So the data processing is a lot more involved for what NAT Gateway does versus load balancer, and the real reason actually for the way this is priced is that is the same thing that the competition charges for this type of service. I mean, just to be perfectly blunt, that is the market price for this sort of functionality.
Yeah, I would also say, Christian, and we can go back and forth on this one. NAT is we're providing this capability as a scale distributed service, and I think that there's a lot of value built into this managed service. Maybe talk a little bit about how customers used to have to do the NAT and kind of what it brings to the table, maybe.
So part of what NAT Gateway allows you to do is to not have to extensively pre-plan your allocations and track them and effectively over-provision things like snap ports to every single device. So NAT Gateway tracks in a more centralized way, which virtual machines are making connections at what point in time, allocates ports as they're needed, and then releases them as they're no longer needed, and then they're available for other virtual machines to use. And we also have some less restrictions and load balancers around what can make up on connections. So for example, if you use load balancer, you can only apply up on rules to the first IP configuration of any given NIC. You can't do it on secondaries. The NAT Gateway really doesn't care. It's just like any outbound connection that is being made. And so this flexibility and the tracking of all of this as a shared state in real time is, is something that's very difficult for us to do, but it also makes it very, very flexible for customers. So load balancer is sort of the yes, it's fine to use for outbound, but it's very complicated. It's occasionally very painful for customers. NAT Gateway is a much more easier, more flexible way to achieve outbound connectivity for subnets.
Yeah, so one thing I like to add on is NAT Gateway is a different service. It's got a different COGS model, and it has different value proposition, like Christian said, and it's priced to be competitive in the market. So that's really the summary.
Yeah, one question I really liked, Narayan, was around zero trust model networking questions and how we're kind of thinking about that. I think the question reports that it doesn't really translate well into cloud. Maybe John has some thoughts around this too, but I know we've talked extensively about this. It's a really good one.
Yeah, I think oh, go ahead, Narayan.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, John.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, the question was really about firewall vendors encouraging inspection between subnets, even in a hub and spoke between the spokes. Well, if I'm trying to sell you firewalls, I'm going to recommend it everywhere. But in reality, as everything with security, it really depends on your requirement, right? So depending on what's happening in those spokes, you may want to do inspection between them. But if they're all within the same security zone, then yeah, it's not needed. So it's not really a cloud versus on-prem. It's really a use or a security zone type question between those locations in the network. You can do it or you don't have to do it. It depends on your security requirements and the traffic or the operations and accessibility of the resources in those two different subnets. So again, with security, it just depends on your situation. You can do it or you don't have to do it. It depends on your needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just maybe add on to say that when you move the application to the cloud, I mean, you want to look at it a bit differently, right? I mean, it shouldn't be just just lift and shift and not make any changes, because then you could be missing out on a lot of things the cloud is providing. It's a bit different in the cloud. So a lot of cloud native offerings to inherently make it secure. So I think it bodes very well, security in the cloud. Like John said, maybe it was okay to use firewall for every single traffic pattern on premises. Maybe that was an overkill by itself, but it may not be true over here at all. I mean, if you put them inside a virtual network in between subnets, so you want to relook at it, from okay, what does the cloud network provides me? What are the real risks to the cloud network, and try to secure those. And I think with our zero trust approach, we have protection at every possible layer where you could have threats. Be it internet or be it internal or be it to another service in Azure. So we have enough of the security primitives, built in or products that we have that you could really achieve zero trust.
Yeah, there's another good one just coming in. I'll publish it now regarding VNetting and IP address subnetting for Azure. We have 2/16s. We're trying to assign 2 different Azure regions, trying to decide if we should run one big VNet per region or multiple VNets, which takes is assigned to a smaller subnet. At least from our thought process, and Narayan and John can jump in here as well, as we see all shapes and sizes for customers' VNets. And I think that it really comes down to, and I really liked what John said earlier, is it comes down to your requirement. We really can support you in any type of VNet size that you're looking for, up to, I think, 64K, so pretty massive VNets. And so we see a lot of the startup companies are doing these very, very large flat networks, and they have very, very low barriers within them. We have other customers, like John had mentioned, that may be on the other side of the spectrum that want to do a lot of east-west inspection. So things like doing VM to VM across subnets. I think some of the benefits that you get with cloud in general is that there's a lot more flexibility, and that there's no longer the constraints of having individual VLANs and all of the traditional on-prem constructs. And so you get a lot of power from utilizing the base functionality of the platform. With NSGs, for example, you can apply them at the subnet, and all your VMs just inherit that. But you can also get more granular and do microsegmentation. So I think that there's just a lot more flexibility in cloud, and I think it's really going to depend on how you believe your workload is going to expand in time. And I think that we've got some pretty cool capabilities coming as well that will make this even stronger across VNets. But Narayan, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that.
No, I think yeah, this is a good answer, and then a question that's been there for a long time, right? And then And the real answer is it depends on the situation. I think Jared put that correctly as to, there could be several different vectors over here. I see people doing a lot of VNets because of management separation, because they hand out different subscription to different teams to kind of have a cost, limit on the subscriptions, and then they create multiple VNets, and then they get peering to connect them. And sometimes, it's for the trust factor, right? They see that, this subscription is more web exposed. This subscription is going to use to be hosting all my databases. So which means let them be two different VNets and then let them come via firewall. So it really depends. I mean, you can take any approach, right?
Yeah, one thing I really do like is you could still use that /16 for an entire region, but then break it down into smaller segments to define to each VNet or subnet, because that can make your on-prem allocation and firewall rules and things like that easier if you know that this region falls in this /16, and then subnet that out to be able to do VNets or subnets that give you the granularity and functionality that you need. But again, as I think both Narayan and Jared said, you can do it either way. It just depends on your requirements and what you want to get out of Azure. The segregation of duties has really been a popular reason to segment stuff out. So yeah, so I think just depends on your requirements.
Another one for you, Narayan, and then I'll jump to Kat on a few of the monitoring questions related to App Gateway. Is there a best practice to secure storage accounts? I think that's a fun one. Yeah, I think that we can probably talk about the networking for sure.
Securing storage, I'm going to take definitely the networking view over here. I mean, a lot of identity solutions, they keep releasing, so you should definitely look into those and make it as secure as possible. They're very granular RBAC rules as well for storage. So I'm not an expert on that. There's a lot of documentation that you can read. From a networking standpoint, secure storage definitely. I know with private link, I think you do have that. In fact, when you create the storage account itself, you have an option to keep it secure. So it is bond secure. So you can inject the storage account directly into the VNet and never expose the internet since since time zero, right? Or you can also when you do Azure policy in your subscription that to check for this. And we have some samples as well where if there are any storage accounts that is in a subscription without private link enabled on them, Azure policy could scan and tell you those, and you can make them secure. So definitely, I mean, making it private is going to cut off access from a lot of unwanted sources. If you're worried about someone else hacking into your storage account, that's definitely an additional security thing I would recommend to make the storage account secure.
Awesome. Kat, there were a number of questions on App Gateway monitoring and how to know what the current connections per second are and all of these things. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the monitoring and maybe post a link as well. You're on mute, Kat. It says you're not, but try again. No dice. Here, we'll switch off of you for a second, Kat. Another question about microsegmentation. Speaking of microsegmentation, for microservice security, what's the best practice? Maybe Narayan, if you have some thoughts there.
So one thing that we have seen people do, and I'm not saying this is the best way to do it, with microservices, when they use Kubernetes-based environment, there is Kubernetes network policies that they can express via YAML files. And I think that's a very good way to define security for microservices. In Azure, you have a couple of ways to implement those. You can obviously use Calico-like policies with the Calico plugin, from the project together. They have their own solution where you can use it along with the AKS cluster to implement those Kubernetes policies. Azure also natively has a Kubernetes network policy implementation. So when you use advanced networking, you get Azure CNI, you can also enable that policy engine. So which actually will implement the Kubernetes network policies. So that's definitely one way to do it. And for the infrastructure, for the subnet itself, you could use again, good old NSGs, ASGs. You can send the traffic, from the subnet to a firewall. That you can do. But if the question is more around microservices, based segmentation, and then I would recommend looking into Kubernetes policies and using one of the implementations in Azure native one or the Calico one.
And I think we're just 3 or 4 minutes off at the end of our session. Any last thoughts from everyone in this session? I think that these were, I mean, really great questions. We've got hundreds and hundreds that have come in, so thanks so much for the feedback and the questions that you all have. We're super interested in what you're looking for, and I think we got great information about guidance that you'd look to have us update, for example, some of the new capabilities that we have coming out. I think there's a lot of excitement there. I don't know, Narayan or anyone else, if you have any additional thoughts here.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of great questions. Somebody was asking if this can be, recorded and given back to them. We have to check on that. I think there's even some questions that we haven't even been able to get to. So we'll find out what's the right way to kind of summarize and share all these question and answers to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and check out, we'll have lots more sessions at Inspire and Ignite as well. So keep looking out for our blogs as they come out. We do a lot of releases outside of the major conferences too. So keep checking and we'll be sure to publish those and get those capabilities out to you.
And just quickly, please use things like user voice to make your feature requests known, as well as to keep in touch with them. We pay attention carefully to what comes into user voice and to other feedback channels. And user voice is also a way for you to keep in touch on what's happening with that. How do we, as product owners, think about the request that's being made, and you can follow through if the request is actually going to happen when it's going to be released. So that and Azure service updates are probably the best ways to keep in touch on what's happening.
Yeah, could not agree more. Yeah, and like Christian also said, there's the Azure Roadmap, aka.ms/Azure Roadmap is a great way of seeing what's coming up on the roadmap across your services. We also recommend taking a look and working with your account teams, if applicable, to continue to learn more about these features and services. I don't see any new questions in the last minute or so, so I think we are good if anyone doesn't have any further questions. Cool. And I think we'll end it now. Thanks everyone, and have a good rest of the day, night, wherever you are in the world. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.